Yeah, but now he's frozen. What's going on with our internet? You know, it's never simple. Let me go check. I'll be back again. Oh,
Yeah, we're back. We're back.
I don't know why it was doing that.
I'm gonna switch to the other internet. Just one sec.
Okay.
Maybe I don't know how bandwidth works, but maybe when you sign off, you'll have more feed.
All right, we're good now.
Possible, but we've usually can all be on a link. All right, I'm going to mute myself and.
So everyone knows what I'm here to talk about today. Yeah, the Enneagram. Familiar with that? Anyone familiar with what it is?
Mm-hmm.
Sort of.
No.
Okay. So, so as a psychologist, when someone walks in my office, I do depth-oriented psychotherapy, and I've studied that intensely. And so when someone walks in my office and they want to understand something about themselves or their motivation or a symptom that they're experiencing, my first goal is to find out what their motivation is. What are the unconscious things that motivate them? And I came across 20 years ago, one of the most valuable tools I've ever had. And I'm going to try to give you in 1 hour distill 20 years worth of information if I can. But it is one of the most useful tools for being a psychotherapist I have found. And it is the first thing that I look for when I'm sitting down with a patient. It's an ancient tool called the Enneagram, spelled Enneagram. I'll hold it up to the camera here. If you can see it, it's spelled like that. And down here, if you can see it, there's a little symbol. It's a circle with some lines in it. And it's a mathematical symbol of how all processes unfold. Every process in the universe, from your DNA right down to the formation of solar systems and even galaxies, everything can unfold in 9 distinct steps. In other words, there's 9 places in a process that can be measured as having a whole quality. So a way of understanding that is that if you take an instrument called a calliope and you play one long descending note that goes down, you don't hear any one quality. But if you stop that note along the way at different intervals, you will hear whole qualities called notes. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. So there's 8 notes in an octave, plus silence is a whole quality in and of itself. And that makes 9 steps. So 9 places in any process, ascending or descending process, where a quality can be measured as a whole. And there's a mathematical formula that illustrates this. So I'm going to get my whiteboard now. You need to understand a little bit of math, and then we'll get into the psychology of it and how it works psychologically. There's 2 numbers, the law of 3 and the law of 7, which define processes. 1/3 can be written as a repeating decimal, 0.33333, or 0.66666, or 0.99999, all in thirds, and they repeat infinitely. That's the law of 3. For any phenomenon to arise, three qualities are necessary. Proton, electron, neutron, and atom, mother, father, child, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, whatever you want, wherever you look, you see that it takes 3 forces to create a phenomenon. So that's the law of 3. The second law is 1/7. That's the law of, I'm going to close the vent here because my son's yelling at his video game. 1/7 is the law of processes, how all processes unfold. And that can be written as a decimal, 2.142857, 142,857. It repeats infinitely. So these 2 laws, when they're put together, make this geometrical symbol. And it looks like this. So there's a circle, and there's an inner triangle, and then there are these outer lines. Go like this. Sorry, it's a very bad Enneagram. And we have 9 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And you'll notice it goes 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7, 1, 4, 2. That's the law of 7. And then 9, 6, 3 is the law of 3. That's the Enneagram, symbol of 9, it means. It is mathematical. It's not astrology or hocus pocus or anything like that. It has its basis in Pythagorean theorem, and it's many thousands of years old. It was held in secret for a long time in some sort of esoteric schools of thought on the Pamir in Afghanistan. It's very ancient. It goes back to pre-Babylon. And it's been kept secret for thousands of years. And there was a man in 1914 who gained entry to one of these schools, and they taught him the Enneagram. His name was George Gurdjieff, and Gurdjieff was the first teacher of the Enneagram. He showed up in Moscow teaching it around 1914. And it's a profound symbol because there is so much that can go into it and be understood through it, including human motivation. So if we understand it's a map of symbols of how processes unfold, consider the fact that a human being is a process of awareness. And that process of awareness begins at birth or maybe before. And it unfolds until a process of awareness, an individual becomes aware of themselves and their early environment. And that process becomes fixated or stuck someplace. So each of these points around the Enneagram we call a fixation point. And when a person comes into my office, the first thing I'm looking at is what is their ego fixation point? What ego style do they have? And it turns out, this is going to sound reductionistic, but it's true, I've only ever met 9 people. The same 9 people come into my office. And as soon as they start telling me their story that defines them and elucidating their symptoms, I can immediately find where they are on the Enneagram. Now, there's an interesting thing about the Enneagram is it has a direction both of integration and disintegration, because every octave is either rising or falling. So it is true with all phenomenon in the universe, including people. So let me use myself as an example. We really don't appear as a point. We appear somewhere on the circle. And me, I appear right about here. What that means is my ego style is mostly type 5 with a little bit of type 6. So a person's ego style can be at one point with a little bit of another point on one side, but not on the other, only one side. Now, interestingly, remember if we go back to 142857, that is a direction of disintegration or a descending octave. So everything in the universe rising or falling in vibration. So if it's a descending octave, what that means is that as I disintegrate or become psychically unhealthy as a person, I go backwards along this line of disintegration towards looking more like a type 7. However, when I integrate or become more psychologically healthy as a whole process again, I move on this line towards type 8. So 142857 is going downstream. However, 758241 is going up the vibrational octave towards integration. So with people, because we don't know what we are, we're more preoccupied with who we are. We're mostly all of us in a disintegrative pattern, and that's what brings people to seek therapy. Now, here's a really interesting thing, going back to the law of 3. A human is made up of 3 different energies, 3 different sort of perceptions of the world. And we have down here in our gut an instinctual intelligence, and then here in the solar plexus, an emotional intelligence, and then up here in our frontal lobes, brand spanking new intellectual intelligence, roughly only 2 million years old, which means it's brand new. We just got here. So humans have 3 forms or 3 brains, so to speak, that function by different information. Down here in our gut, we sense the world, we sense ourselves, we feel hot, cold, pain, hunger, tired, pleasure, fatigue, all down here at the base of our spine and our gut. But also there's a higher part there, intuition. here, the lower part is our emotion. Emotion comes from our reactions to the world from our own small ego story. And the higher part is feeling. Feelings do not come from our ego. Feelings arrive from impressions outside. If I lose someone close to me, I have a feeling called grief. If I see my son play trumpet solo in band, I have a feeling called joy. In both things, water will come out of my eyes. One form of water is weeping. The other form of water is radiating. Love and affection. That's here. The lower function here is thinking, which we are all addicted to. And the higher function is perceiving, which does not involve thought at all. Now, here's the thing about the Enneagram. The Enneagram maps that 8, 9, and 1, those are all instinctual types of people, personalities. 2, 3, and 4, those are all emotionally centered personalities. And 5, 6, and 7 are all rational types of personalities. In other words, we have these 3 forms of intelligence that when we were little, between the ages of 3 and 5, they were united for a whole unified process of awareness. And then we became self-aware, and these 3 energies broke apart from each other. And we defaulted to one of them as our primary form of understanding life. It doesn't mean the other 2 don't work anymore. They do, they just don't work together. To this end, when someone walks in, I ask myself, where is their center of gravity? Where do they find themselves? Is it here in their intellect? Is it here in their feeling? Or is it here down in their instinctual self? And that tells me a lot about their motivation, where they're coming from, what they're seeking. So 8, 9, and 1 are all primarily types that are concerned with autonomy. They want a strong sense of themselves. 2, 3, and 4 are all preoccupied with value. They want a strong value of themselves. And 5, 6, and 7 are all preoccupied with security. They all want a sense of a secure self. But each 3 types pursues it in different ways. So someone walks in and I ask them a few questions and I get a good reading on what is their primary pursuit. To that end, you have to study sort of all the types to find out what their primary motivation is. And this takes quite a long time. And there's been a number of books written on this. So accurate is the system and so useful that it's actually now being taught at Stanford Medical School in the School of Psychiatry to use as a diagnostic tool. Because we found in the DSM-4, now the DSM-4, DSM-5, that's the book called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It's the book that we diagnose mental disorders from. And what we figured out is that when someone comes in with a mental disorder, we can find them on the Enneagram in a state of disintegration. Type 1 and type 4, you see, are on a line. This line represents a continuum. Type 1 type 1 and type 4 tend to struggle with depressive disorders. Whereas something like type 8 and 2 tend to struggle with control disorders or obsessive compulsive disorders. Or something like type 5 and 7, you tend to find more psychotic disorders such as schizophrenia. So we can find where a person is in their diagnosis, and then we have a compass, a way forward. So let's say someone comes into my office and they're a type 2. Type 2 is also known as the helper, the giver. They're an emotional type. They're very selfless people. They tend to struggle setting boundaries. They tend to want to do all things for all people. They're very nurturing types. However, when they disintegrate and they do not get an affection that they're looking for through giving to people, they become very controlling and demanding and autonomous, like an unhealthy type 8. However, when they become healthy, they move towards type 4. Type 4 is known as the artist or the romantic. These are deeply artistic types of people. I suspect there's a lot of them right here with us, type 4s. Writers, I'm married to one, a type 4. They're very autistic, authentic, original people, and they need to symbolize themselves in some form of art. Van Gogh, Kurt Cobain, Jim Morrison, Georgia O'Keeffe, all artistic types, deeply feeling types, highly identified with their feelings. They feel their way through the world, and they must find a way to symbolize themselves. And so you find them as writers, poets, artists, musicians, etc. Whereas type 5, it's a very intellectual type. Who do we know like that? You tend to find them as engineers and theoretical physicists, geeks and nerds everywhere, type 5s. So what we find here is these different centers of sort of gravity. So as a type 5, what I find is I am most healthy and most integrated when I get out of my head. And then the next stop for me along this line is into my body, because type 8, 9, and 1 are all instinctual types. So I find when I exercise a lot or do yoga or stretch, I have better access next to my feelings, because 8 goes to 2, and it's a feeling type. And so when you deeply experience yourself, not as a static thing, who I am, but as a process, what I am, it gets this moving again, this direction of integration, and you become what you are intended to be, a whole person with a true being. Most people lack being because it's hard to define what being is, but it's a sense of oneself as a whole. So mostly we experience ourselves quite partially through our wrong ideas about who we are, rather than getting interested in what we are. So that's the Enneagram. It's 20 years all jammed into one quick introduction. Yes.
Can you do a brief overview of the types? Because I think that
Sure.
that will really be interesting to everybody.
Sure. So this has been a little book that's been absolutely invaluable to me. I used to teach the Enneagram to my patients. This is called Enneagram Transformations. It's about $13. You can get it on Amazon. There are many good books on the Enneagram. Most of the people writing them do not know its origins or what it really does. They only write about it from one perspective, and that's from the perspective of human personality. But there are so many more different applications of what the Enneagram is. I used to teach it to patients, but what I found was that an experiential change inside of them is better than an analytic change. So the Enneagram is an analytic tool. It's for analyzing processes. But sometimes I just need to help a person make an inner change, and there's no time to describe what they are to them. I just have to set up an experiential understanding that helps them begin to integrate themselves again. And that's primarily what I try to do, is find out what this person's fixation type is, where they're stuck as a process, and then what needs to happen to get the process going. Often we've had a lifetime of talking to ourselves in our head. We've internalized a voice, and we have a set of beliefs and presuppositions that we call me. And we have no counteractive dialogue to that story that defines me. So we get very attached to our fixation, and we can't move beyond it, and we don't know why. So this particular book, the main book that I've used for personal study, there's two of them. One is called The Wisdom of the Enneagram by Don Riso, R-I-S-O. He's the one who wrote this little book too. And that is an in-depth understanding of what the Enneagram is in regards to human personality. The second book by Dr. Claudio Naranjo, he's a Chilean psychiatrist. The book is called Character and Neuroses. And that is a clinical textbook. I think you can get it on Amazon. It's a little expensive. But he writes only about the disintegration of each type. So it's very depressing to read, because you're reading about each fixation type at its worst disintegrative manifestation. But for understanding human behavior, it's absolutely invaluable. So those are the two books. This is a book written by Don Riso that I hand out to my patients when I come across a patient who is deeply insight oriented and is really inquisitive about what they are rather than who they are. And so I give them this book as a means to create an alternative dialogue in their head. So this book has 9 one-page descriptors of each fixation point. And then afterwards, it has a list of little releases and affirmations, little things people can say to themselves that help them kind of take off their persona like it's a coat. So the Enneagram and some esoteric theory assumes what most of our major thinkers in the field of psychology thought was a breakthrough. The Enneagram assumes that we're stuck, and there's two parts of us. There's the essence of who you are. And the essence of who you are is something you brought into this plane of existence, earthly existence. It is not related to your mother. It is not related to your father. It is not related to your early environment. It is solely yours. It cannot be broken. It cannot be defective. It cannot be flawed. What happens as a result of our getting stuck in our family of origin story is that our persona, which is our false self, comes in and starts to strangle the essence of us. Then the persona or ego style, they're kind of synonymous, those two words, takes over, and we lose touch with the essence of who we are. So persona, of course, is Latin, and it means mask. So personality is a mask that you present to the world that is a set of unconscious presuppositions gained in your early childhood. This describes each persona style. So it's not right to say a person is a particular type. It's better to say, I have a particular type. I have a type 5 persona style. However, what I am is an entire Enneagram. So you are an Enneagram, a process, a 9-step process of unfolding awareness. And it's better to say, this is the ego style I have, not who I am or what I am. So I thought I'd just go through and read the 9 pages and maybe a few of the releases and affirmations that help you understand. Would that be useful? Yeah, okay. So we're going to start with type 1, which is in the instinctual triad, and then go through all the way through 1 through 9. And you will find yourself as I'm talking. Now, here's the thing. Enneagram tests online, a lot of people have published tests who really don't know what it is. I don't find those useful, because what happens when we take the Enneagram tests to find out our type is we end up typing ourselves like our dominant parent. We type ourselves poorly. We type ourselves ideally. It's best to let people who know what the Enneagram is experience us and let them tell us our type. When my first encounter with it many, many years ago, I typed myself as a type 2, which was my mother. And I proudly went around telling people that, and all the people who knew the Enneagram on a deep level went, no, you're not. You're not a 2, man. You're a type 5. And I was like, really? And then I went and read the 5 and I went, ew, I don't want to be that. And so that's what verified that's what type I am, because I had an aversive experience reading it. So be careful when you're listening to this, because you're going to go, is that me? Is that me? And it takes some time to really arrive at what defines my persona style. So let's start with type 1. Type 1 is often referred to as the reformer. Type 1s try to escape their fear of being condemned and flawed by striving to be perfect. They see themselves as fair, reasonable, and objective, although others may see them as rigid, dogmatic, and overly critical. Type 1 believes that if they can discipline themselves sufficiently, they can avoid making mistakes. Being human, however, they do make mistakes, obliging them to struggle ever harder to organize and improve everything in their lives. If they see that others do not share their idealism, ones increasingly become unable to control their anger about having to do everything themselves. If ones continue pushing themselves towards perfection, the repressed parts of their psyches explode, leaving them enraged and irrational. So type 1 fixation, Oscar Caso, one of the first developers of the Enneagram, called it ego wrath. They're angry types of people generally. Type 1s can escape this trap by acknowledging and releasing their unrealistic expectations of themselves and others. They begin to understand that the standards by which they judge the world are not absolute truths. As ones recognize the subjective quality of many of their positions, they begin to respect the beliefs and values of others. Without the constraints of perfectionism, their vision opens to a reality more mysterious and more perfect than they could ever conceive. In history, we find great type 1s in Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Susan B. Anthony, great social reformers everywhere. People who work for a cause. There's a young woman, she's very type 1. Her name is Greta Thunberg. She's very involved in the environment. However, some of you might have seen a video of her where she lost control of her temper and exploded at a UN conference. And that's a type 1. They are working, they see that we're not being responsible. They're very responsible people. They're very parentified from a very young age, and they feel it is their responsibility to put things right. So when they come in, they often feel defeated, depressed. The world around them is unsatisfactory. They feel that they're too one person, I can't do anything about it. Often you find type 1s in law enforcement. They're rule-bound people. You follow the rules, you do it the right way. When they go overboard, you'll find them sort of, they're the ones you see on the videos screaming in Walmart about having to wear a mask or something like that. They have a cause. Their cause is more important than their relationships. That's a type 1. So an alternative dialogue. I now release holding myself and others to impossible standards. I now release my fear of losing control and becoming irrational. I now release my fear of being condemned for being wrong. I now release refusing to see my own contradictions. I now release obsessing over things I cannot change. A lot of alcoholics are type 1 because they'll grind and grind and grind on injustice, and then they need to medicate themselves with something to get out of their own painful thoughts. I now release striving myself and others to be perfect. I now release feeling angry, impatient, and easily annoyed. I now release believing that I am in a position to judge others. Some affirmations of type 1. I now affirm that the best I can do is good enough. I now affirm that I can allow myself to relax and enjoy life. Type 1s feel like if there's any suffering anywhere, I can't relax. I have to do something about it. And so they have a hard time really appreciating the subtler things in life. They're always looking for what's wrong with something. They have a critical eye. A type 1 can look at a painting and see the flaw. There's the flaw. That's what he did wrong there. And that tortures them because they turn that powerful criticism on themselves. There's also a theory about what makes a type 1, because families line up around the Enneagram. I can often find parents, a type 1 will often have a type 7 parent. In other words, their parent is one position up from them on the Enneagram. Interestingly, I'm a type 5, and my son is showing up a type 7, which is one down from a type 5 in the direction of disintegration. And I found that to be true in all family systems. Okay, so moving on to type 2. So now we're moving into the feeling triad. So we're leaving the instinct down here, and we're coming up to here. Type 2s try to escape their fear of being unloved by constantly doing things for others. They see themselves as thoughtful and well-meaning and generous, although others may sometimes see them as intrusive and self-deceptive. To get others to love them, 2s believe that they must always be selfless and virtuous, so they sacrifice their own needs and desires for the good of others. If others do not give type 2 the love they want, their disappointment and anger must also be denied and repressed. Thus, 2s become caught between feeling love and feeling rage. Over time, suppressing their negative feelings takes its toll on their health and relationships, and they lash out at the very people whose love they so desperately want. Type 2s can escape this trap by acknowledging and releasing their ulterior motives and negative feelings towards others. The more honest they are about themselves, the more emotionally balanced they become. By recognizing and accepting all the different parts of themselves, even the negative ones, type 2 can undo the contradictions that have blocked them from being close to others. So classic type 2s are like Mother Teresa, very giving, giving, giving. And then she got accused of going around the world and collecting awards. But she wanted some love in return, some acknowledgement. But a type 2 has to be completely selfless. I have no self. Sort of think of the Italian grandmother who does everything for you. It's all for you, but they're a little bit martyred and you feel guilty, like, grandma, you just take it easy. You don't need, oh, don't you love me? And they kind of nail themselves to the cross and become self-sacrificial because they will not acknowledge that they have any negative feelings towards other people. They're constant givers and caretakers, and you find them in the nursing field, and you find them in an advocacy field sometimes, kind of like type 1s. And oh, no, I don't need anything in return is what you get from a type 2. So when type 2s come into my office, sometimes I'll say, you are just so nice and so giving. When you give them what they want, they deny it. Oh, it's okay. So there's a lot of false humility in a type 2. Some releases for type 2 are, I now release the fear that I'm unwanted and unloved. I now release all attempts to force others to love me in the way I want. I now release making others feel guilty for not responding sufficiently to my needs. I now release abusing food and medications to make up for my loneliness and isolation. I now release feeling that others owe me for the things that I do for them. A type 2 will always give here's some cupcakes, and now pat me on the back, but they won't say that. If you don't say thank you for the cupcakes, I'm offended. You've hurt my feelings. So love becomes kind of a currency, or giving becomes a currency for a type 2. I now release expecting others to repay my help in the way that I want them to. They tend to be somaticizers, so they have lots of physical complaints. I now release all physical ailments, aches, and complaints. I now release calling attention to what I have done for others. I now release doing things for others to make myself needed. I now release flattering others to make them feel good about me. I now release wanting to acknowledge my negative feelings. Some affirmations are, I now affirm that I can let go of my loved ones and love them freely. I now affirm that I nurture my own growth and development. I now affirm that I love others without expecting anything in return. I now affirm that I can be grateful for all that others have given to me. So that's a type 2. They're often extremely self-sacrificing and extremely resentful about the same thing, that they're so self-sacrificing. A lot of type 2s, you flowers and kittens and babies and giving and kind of a smothering kind of love that they expect returned back to them. All right, next one is the type 3. Type 3s are some of the hardest to treat. The ego fixation is ego vanity, whereas for type 2, it's ego flattery. This is ego vanity, type 3. Type 3s try to escape from their fear of being rejected by seeking the affirmation of others through personal excellence. They see themselves as competent and worthwhile, although others may see them as attention-seeking and arrogant. If type 3s sense that others are not responding to them, they begin to project an image that they believe will be more desirable. Thus, 3s disown their true self piece by piece, then invest their energy in a role that they play until they lose touch with their feelings and any sense of who they really are. Terrified that someone will see through their facade to the growing emptiness inside, they may betray themselves and others to save their self-image. 3s can escape this trap by acknowledging and releasing their desire for attention and admiration. They see themselves as their ceaseless search for applause alienates them from themselves and leads them away from deeper values. As they dare to give up their masks, they discover that they are not empty, but they have many long buried feelings and selfless impulses. By pursuing values and relationships that nourish their spirit, they discover the authentic self that they have long concealed is more admirable than any image they could project. Type 3s, you will find them in the personal growth and motivation field. Tony Robbins, type 3. A lot of politicians, type 3. Bill Clinton, type 3. Very image, success straight, have to get to the next higher office, have to get to the next thing. Highly achievement oriented. I know a type 3 walks in my office because they're usually energetic. They get up early in the morning and they can't figure out why they can't get promoted at work because they're trying to get somewhere. They feel life is an achievement game, not a being game. And they always want the next thing. They don't do psychotherapy well because they want a plan. Just give me a plan to get to the next step. And so they don't really like deep interpersonal relationships. They're too busy on their way. You find them in the personal training field, the coaching field, personal fitness field. You know, you find them in the Olympics, in sports. They have to get to the next level, highly, highly achieving. That's really all that matters. But they feel empty inside and they don't know who they really are, who their real self is, because they've created personas to please other people. I now release being obsessed by my hostile feelings towards others. They're very competitive people. If someone's doing better than them, they take it as a personal failure. I need to achieve more, so they can get hostile towards people competitively. I now release believing that sabotaging others will make things better for me. You find them in high finance. They want to kind of screw the other guy and get ahead, and they feel they're winning. I now release feeling jealous of others and their good fortune. I now release my fear of failing and being humiliated. I now release my fearing that I am inadequate and will be rejected. I now release feeling that I must conceal my mistakes and limitations. I now release closing down my feelings in order to function at a higher level. I now release betraying my own integrity to get the admiration of others. I have a mortgage banker in high finance right now he's a type 3 and he does lots of charities. He offers to MC charities because he likes to tell jokes and gets everyone's applause and they all love him. And he admits he goes down to the crowd just to hear the compliments that come to him. And he says, but I don't really know who I am. I'm struggling to find out who I really am. So affirmations of type 3. I now affirm that I have value regardless of what I achieve. I now affirm that I am centered and emotionally available to others. I now affirm that I am responsible to those who look up to me. I now affirm that I'm happy to work for the good of others. I now affirm that I develop my true talents by accepting who I am, not how I appear. So that's type 3. It's called the motivator, type 3, whereas 2 is the giver, 3 is the motivator. Type 4, this is the artistic type, and many people here might feel they identify with this. The artist, sensitive and withdrawn. Type 4s try to escape from their fear of being flawed and defective by throwing themselves into their feelings. They see themselves as sensitive and intuitive, while others may see them as overly touchy and too ruled by their feelings. 4s believe that they will find solution to their emotional turmoil by endlessly replaying their problems in their imagination. As they go around and round about the past, they stir up powerful cross currents of emotion that draw them further inward until they begin to lose perspective on themselves, undermining their ability to deal effectively with life. In time, their emotional conflicts and difficulties fan the flames of their self-doubt and self-hatred, and they withdraw into a darkening world of torment and despair. 4s can escape this trap by acknowledging and releasing their strong attachment to their feelings. As they do so, 4s learn that their feelings do not die as they had feared, but that other talents and capacities become available that can be acted on. The more they interact with reality, the richer their emotional life becomes. No longer the prisoner of every shifting mood, they find that their practical accomplishments grow. Thus, 4s are discovered that they are not only intuitive and creative, but also capable and strong. So type 4 is probably the most therapy-seeking type I've encountered. I have more 4s come into my office because this is their primary way of experiencing the world, is their feelings, and they get lost in their feelings and they don't know how to get out. So they tend to have negative self-images, and they're looking for some way to symbolize themselves in art or writing to change their image. And what I usually help them with is encouraging them towards art. Do something to symbolize yourself, but do not mistake your image with your authenticity. Authenticity and image are different things. type 4s often tell me they feel broken or defective in some way, misunderstood. They're not like their mom. They're not like their dad. They didn't feel like they fit in with their families. They can be very emotionally indulgent. They tend to act on their feelings. So I will tell type 4s, when you wake up in the morning and you're feeling in a low mood, don't act on that mood. So if the mood says stay in bed, don't do that. Get out of bed, put your shoes on, come to therapy. By 9 o'clock, that feeling is gone. So they kind of climb into their feelings, like climbing into the cockpit of an airplane, but they steer it towards the ground. They got to know how far down they go. And I go, no, you don't need to know how far down you go. It goes pretty far, but we're going in the other direction. If we're a process, we want to go up the scale, not down it. They suffer from depression. I now release turning my anger and aggressions against myself. First day of graduate school in psychotherapy, they said depression is anger turned inward on the self. They can't get angry at their mom and dad, so they get angry at themselves. I now release all self-hatred and self-contempt. I now release all feelings of hopelessness and despair. I now release all self-sabotaging thoughts and actions. A lot of type 4s cannot get into life because they cannot build their practical accomplishments. They get started on a path and go, oh, I'm no good at this, and then they quit and go back to the beginning again. I'm dealing with a 25-year-old just today he's on his 5th job in just under a year because he quits immediately. He has a negative self-image. And I got to sabotage it. And then he throws it all down. Just don't be ruled by your feelings and go to work anyway, no matter what you feel, and your practical accomplishments will grow. I now release the fear that I'm unimportant and undesirable. I now release feeling shameful and misunderstood by others. Shame is a key emotional truth of a type 4. I'm ashamed of my image of myself. Don't look at me. We tend to approach type 4 more in our teenage years. If you think of the story of Frankenstein, it's really a father and son story about a type 4 son who feels like a monster. All he wants is his father's love. His father rejects him, and he goes on a self-sabotaging killing spree. So a lot of young men you find in jail who've gone berserk, you can find a type 4 there. Yeah, I now release being distraught, fatigued, and inhibited. I now release feeling that people always let me down. I now release all unrealistic expectations I have of myself. I now release all self-indulgence in my emotions. I now release wanting to protect myself by withdrawing from others. I now release dwelling on the past to prolong my feelings. Type 4s always live in the past. They're always ruminating on their past decisions, what they did wrong. I now affirm that I'm not defined by what I feel. I now affirm that only the feelings I act on express who I am. I now affirm that I open myself up to people in the world. I now affirm that I can use all experiences to grow rather than just quit. So that's the type 4. I see more type 4s than any other type, if I'm honest, because they're the ones who truly seek therapy, wanting to know what's going on. Type 5. So we're leaving this area and we're coming to this area now. I'm a type 5. And I've gone back and forth whether I'm a type 5 with a little bit of 6 or a type 5 with a little bit of 4, because sometimes I feel a lot of 4 inside of me. I still haven't settled on that yet. Type 4 is called the thinker, intellectual, analytic type. Type 5s try to escape their fear of being overwhelmed and powerless by focusing on specific areas of life which they feel they can master. They see themselves as intelligent and profound, although others may see them as intense and strangely detached. As 5s become convinced that they cannot cope with people or with practical life, they retreat into private mental worlds. They seek sanctuary in their minds. George Lucas, Stephen King, right? Fantasy worlds, Dungeons and Dragons. While they seek sanctuary in their minds while watching the outside world with growing anxiety. Eventually, their fears taint their thoughts so much that 5s feel they must cut off their connections with the world to protect themselves from their terrors. With nothing to hold on to or believe in, they ultimately shrink away into a self-created prison of isolation and hopelessness. every fantasy novelist, sci-fi novelists, Heinlein and King, and all type 5s. They find a better world inside than they do on the outside. They seek sanctuary in ivory towers or in fields of study like psychology, collect a lot of important papers to hang on the wall to prove their competency, but they'll never outrun the feeling that they feel incompetent. It's a feeling I've never been able to outrun as well as I've done as a therapist and with the reputation I think I've earned. I still always feel like I'm supposed to know something more. So now type 5 releases. I now release all fearfulness of the world around me. I now release all feelings of powerlessness and hopelessness. I now release my dark and destructive fantasies. I now release isolating myself by rejecting others. I now release being cynical and contemptuous of the normalcy of others. Type 5s like to see themselves as intellectually superior, and so they look down on others from their ivory tower. Philosophers everywhere, Schopenhauer, Nietzsche. I find type 5 tends to be more of a masculine types. For some reason, the types do align via gender, but not always. I meet a lot of type 5 females as well. I now release feeling that others will exploit me. I now release feeling that I'm a misfit in life. I now release being secretive and hiding from people. I now release postponing my emotional needs. Oftentimes when I ask a type 5 patient, what are you feeling right now? They'll tell me what they think. Well, I'm thinking that I'm getting better. No, that's a thought. What are you feeling? What do you mean? Do you feel happy or sad or angry or scared? Well, I think I'm getting better. No. I have to actually stop them from conceiving of themselves and start perceiving themselves. Stephen Hawking, Albert Einstein, all type 5s. Marie Curie, female type 5. Geeks and nerds everywhere. That's me, geek and nerd. Some affirmations are, I now affirm that I reach out to others confidently as an equal. I now affirm that I'm not better than others. I now affirm that I find serenity in being compassionate towards people. I now affirm that I can accept uncertainty and ambiguity, that I do not have to have the answer. I now affirm that I can have faith in the future and in my fellow human beings. So that's a type 5. Then we move to type 6, also in the thinking triad. Type 6s, they're called the loyalist, or they're committed traditional types of people. You tend to find them in the military. They want to sign up to belong to a group that gives them their identity. They're afraid of being on the wrong side of things. So you find them as police officers or some other form of advocates, but they tend to be paranoid and negative and complaining. There's type 6 is sort of the glue that holds society together. At their worst, they become paranoid schizophrenics, type 6 does. They're primarily ruled by fear. Type 6 tries to escape their fear of being abandoned and alone by allying themselves with others. They see themselves as trustworthy and reliable, although others may see them as defensive and insecure. They want to feel that they belong somewhere, so they look to others to provide security and to show them what to do. If I'm wearing a badge, and all these other guys are wearing badges, now I know I'm a good guy, I'm loyal. The problem is that 6s are also anxious about depending on others. Thus, they are caught between needing security of an authority, but wanting to also prove their independence. 6s may try to solve their anxiety with outbursts of misdirected aggression against those around them. When their outbursts drive away supporters and protectors, 6s become more anxious and depressed. They can escape this trap by acknowledging and releasing their feelings of dependency. By learning to center themselves and trust their own capacities, they find a stable place within themselves that they can believe in, and they do not need to depend on others to save them. Type 6s, when they come in to see me, automatically look to me as the authority who's going to save them and save them from their symptoms and tell them what to do and give them meaning. And when I don't, they become very angry and very punishing. You failed me, Dr. Peterson, and I get a lot of that, and that's their transform. They can be very punishing people, very, very punitive, unforgiving, extremely rigid. They're one of the most difficult types to work with in therapy because I don't need you, but I need you. I mean, go away, but stay here, but go away. And so you constantly feel in a push-pull relationship with a type 6, and it can be maddening. I find there are more type 6 men than women. So I now release feeling persecuted, trapped, and desperate. I now release over-exaggerating and overreacting and exaggerating my problems. I now release taking out my fears and anxieties on others. I now release feeling inferior and incapable of functioning on my own. I have a 47-year-old attorney. She's a type 6, and she hasn't left home, and she can't leave her mom's side, and she feels unsure of herself. 6s are riddled with self-doubt. They get a message from one parent that you cannot survive in the world without me. You need me. So they're afraid to be independent. And so at 47, she's finally trying to take steps to become her own person, but she's afraid she's being disloyal to mom. And so they both are compliant and rebellious at the same time. So she's compliant with what her mom says at 47, but then she gets angry at her mom and rebels. But then if she rebels, she's without support, so she's got to be compliant again. And it goes back and forth like that. I now release acting tough to disguise my insecurities. I now release my fear and dislike of those who are different from me. I now release my tendency to be negative and complaining. I now release my fear of taking responsibility for my mistakes. They don't want to take responsibility for themselves because they're dependent. I now affirm that I can keep my own identity in groups and relationships. Type 6 will try to blend in and be just like you guys, right? You accept me, right? Because I'm just like you. And they lose themselves sort of piecemeal. I now affirm that I meet difficulties with calmness and confidence. Type 6 tends to be kind of a hysterical type. I now affirm that I'm secure and able to make the best of whatever comes my way. I now affirm that I can act courageously in all circumstances because they're fear-driven. They tend to be retreating. That's type 6. Type 7, also known as the enthusiast. This is, again, a mental type. Type 7s try to escape their fear of being deprived by immersing themselves in constant activity. They see themselves as practical and fun-loving, although others may see them as superficial and infantile. 7s fear that if they run out of stimulation, out of things to have or to do, something terrible will happen. So they stay busy and on the go. They spread themselves too thin, however, using up all their inner resources while constantly distracting themselves with even more experiences. Eventually, the strain causes their health and emotional stability to collapse, and 7s are left exhausted and in a panic. Type 7 is defined in the DSM-4 as bipolar. They're future-oriented. They need the next fun thing to happen. Type 7s can escape this trap by acknowledging and releasing their attachment to being stimulated all the time. When they slow down, they discover that many of their activities do not actually satisfy them, and they let go of their feeling that they must constantly be having new experiences. They then learn to stay with each experience long enough to fully assimilate it. 7s finally realize that no experience or thing in the external world or in the future can ultimately keep them satisfied or free from anxiety. But if they search within themselves, they will find a stillness and a serenity, which is a dependable source of undiminished joy. When 7s come in, they're panicky, they're scared, they're future-oriented, and it's my job to kind of get their feet on the ground. They often join cults and get into wild theories and get a little ungrounded. They feel like they're like 3 feet in front of themselves. They're constantly moving forward. I refer to them as human doings rather than human beings. They're always looking for the next thing. If you try to interrupt their plans for the future, they can be very angry and hostile. You're a wet blanket. Why are you bringing me down? Why are you stopping me? If you've ever tried to stop anyone in the middle of a manic phase to ground them, they become incredibly aggressive and hostile toward you. because you're grounding them. And if you ground me, I have to feel my feelings. And I just want to imagine from here a future where I'm completely unencumbered. They don't do well in marriages because home is not a destination. Home is a waypoint on the way somewhere else. So, a lot of couples, when they come in, I'll find a type 7 female or male, husband or wife, it doesn't matter. And one of them will say, he's never here. He comes home, goes right past us all in the back room, opens his computer, and starts playing games. So you don't feel their presence. You just feel their excitement of the next exciting thing. So they have a hard time being grounded. All roads on their inner map lead to escape, never arrival. Got to have an escape route everywhere. I now release all reckless and destructive impulses. I now release feeling that I will be overwhelmed by anxiety. I now release burning myself out by trying to satisfy all of my desires. They want to do everything. They got 10 projects going at once. I now release running away from the consequences of my actions. I now release insulting or abusing others to vent my frustrations. I now release all my addictions. They get addicted to things very easily. Something's fun and exciting. More, please, more. And I have a type 7 guy right now. He's overcoming alcoholism. He works for a computer company. He went to a computer convention. He said, I walked in the door of this convention and there were so many booths and so many opportunities to learn things. I got so overwhelmed. I didn't know what to do, because I got to take it all in. I had a type 7 psychologist who used to work for me at Kaiser. And he wanted to be traveling all around the world doing this trauma work. And I had to say, Dr. Francis, we need you here. You got to stay rooted here. Do your work here. And when I finally told him, no, you can't go because you're out of time off, he just hit the ceiling. I got to do this. So they have to grab every opportunity, and they can't discern what's for them and what's not. That's just all for me to do. It takes me away from my anxiety. Some affirmations are, I now affirm that I'm happiest when I'm calm and centered. I now affirm that I can say no to myself without feeling deprived. I now affirm that there will be enough for me of whatever I need. I now affirm that I can find happiness and satisfaction in ordinary things. I now affirm that I stay with projects until I complete them. If a type 7 starts something, as soon as they get bored, they quit. I'm done. That's not it for me anymore. They got to move on to the next thing. They do very well with meditation when I teach meditation to them. Because they're so ungrounded, they don't tend to have much spiritual direction in life, which is why you find them joining cults when they get desperate. And they have to learn how to be grateful for just ordinary life, just waking up. For them, if it's not exciting, it's not worth doing. So I have to explain, no, when you get out of bed and just look out the window and appreciate nature and this moment, that should be enough, right? Try to make that enough. It's a radical idea for a type 7. So now we're leaving the intellectual triad and we're going back down here to the instinctual triad, to type 8, the leader, powerful and dominating. Type 8s try to escape from their fear of being in the power or control of others by maintaining a stance of strength and toughness. They see themselves as strong and independent, while others see them as belligerent and dictatorial. In their effort to suppress their fear of vulnerability, 8s begin to see all relationships as power struggles and all intimacy as weakness. They steel themselves against depending on others and seek more power so that no one can take advantage of them. If they continue hardening themselves, they eventually lose the capacity to feel anything for others, love, trust, or pity. 8s ultimately become abusive to get their way and remain in control, causing everyone who has been abused by them to turn against them. 8s can escape this trap by acknowledging and releasing their fear of intimacy. As they do so, they begin to drop their guard and discover that real love and friendship will not threaten them. They find that the more they trust and care for others, the more others willingly support them and help them attain their goals. By allowing others to be close to them, 8s are able to create a world of cooperation and mutual fulfillment rather than one of conflict and mutual destruction. The DSM-4 diagnosis that corresponds with type 8 is often narcissistic personality disorder. Famous male type 8s are Joseph Stalin, Saddam Hussein, Donald Trump, guys who do a lot of damage from that perspective. But there are female eights type 2, Golda Meir, great female type 8, established the state of Israel. Oh, come on, Peterson. My boss at Kaiser, when I was there, when I took over for her as chief of chemical dependency, she was a very strong type 8 female, and I just adored her. She was a great mother figure to me. I now release all anger, rage, and violence from my life. I now release dehumanizing myself by violating others in any way. I now release being verbally or physically abusive. I now release believing that vengeance will free me from my own pain. I now release hardening my heart against suffering. I now release believing that I do not need others. They all tend to be, they have to be the top dog, and I don't need anyone else. So others constantly, they become so autonomous that they can establish cult-like followings around them because they come across as the powerful father figure, Ernest Hemingway, call me Papa. And everyone tends to worship them and want to be taken care of by them. It's how Donald Trump was able to create such a cult of personality. Big, strong, I'm going to take care of you. And weak-minded people, particularly type 6s, will fall into that pattern of deferring to them. And so it can get very dangerous that way. That's why they end up creating regime countries. I now release believing that I must bully people to get my way. You often find type 8s in like football coaching or CEOs of companies, places where they get to dominate other people. And it often doesn't go well unless they learn to loosen up and learn how to love. I now release my fear of losing to anyone. I now release feeling that I must never be afraid. I now release my fear of showing weakness or vulnerability. I often will tell a type 8 person when they're in my office, I say, that this psychotherapy ends with you weeping, right? So you're going to have to be vulnerable in front of me at some point. And if you weep, I will weep with you, and no one else gets to see it except for you and me. And there's this kind of suspiciousness, like, well, what is your angle? And I'm just trying to help you feel your feelings, your compassionate feelings, your tender feelings. I now affirm that I have tender feelings and good impulses for type 8. I now affirm that I can be gentle without being afraid of being exploited. I now affirm that I can master myself, my appetites, my passions. Type 8s are very driven by appetite. They drink heavily, they eat heavily, they love heavily. I now affirm that there can be a greater authority than me. They think I'm the highest, I'm the best authority. There's no one higher than me. And so they don't take feedback when they need it. So that's type 8. Type 9 is one of the most maddening types for me as a therapist. It's called the peacemaker. That's at the top of the Enneagram. Easygoing, phlegmatic. Type 9s try to escape their fear of separation by creating an environment that will nurture them. They see themselves as undemanding and uncomplicated people, although others may feel that they are complacent and neglectful. 9s believe that everything should always be peaceful and harmonious. They begin to create problems, however, because they refuse to look at anything that contradicts their idealized worldview, hoping for the best while ignoring difficulties until others are forced to solve them. Eventually, others become frustrated and angry with them, causing 9s to retreat into a psychic inner sanctum where nothing can touch or hurt them. They eventually turn their backs on reality and can drift into a state of apathy and helplessness. 9s can escape their trap by acknowledging and releasing their idealizations of the world and of others. As they do so, 9s see their loved ones more objectively and realize that others' lives are not inherently more important than their own. This frees type 9 to see their own value and gives them the energy to become actively engaged with life. By investing in their own development and participating fully in their world, 9s will find the contentment they've always sought. Type 9s are kind of neutral about everything. They're peacemakers. They don't have a personality. That's the interesting thing. It's the personality without a personality. They become what you need them to be. If you ask a type 9 where they want to go to dinner, they'll say, well, wherever you want. Right? And no, I wanted to know who you are and what your preferences are. Well, my preferences are your preferences. No, that's not what I want. So they hide in roles. They're chameleon-like. A type 9 is the quietest person in the room who's watching things happen, but is not participating. They don't want to leave fingerprints on anyone. They don't want to leave an impression on anyone. I just want to blend into the woodwork. If there's a conflict in the room, they're the ones who step into the eye of the hurricane where it's nice and quiet and they're not affected by anybody. But it can be absolutely maddening when you're in a relationship to them because you can't find them. I had a couple one time. He was a type 9, she was a type 4. She wanted him to show up with his feelings, but type 9s are numb. I mean, they're just numb to whatever they feel. She wanted him to show up. So she threatened him. She said, well, I'm going to have an affair with another person. And I tried to get him to participate. And I said, I think you should, to her. What do you think of that? And he looked at me and he said, well, whatever you think is best, doctor. No, you're supposed to stand up and say, no, this is my wife. I love you. And take a position, plant a flag. But they do not plant a flag on anything. They're just kind of like Switzerland. It's just no impression. So that's a type 9. They're numb. They struggle with a low level of depression called dysthymia. They get into comforting habits and routines, and they don't want to get out of them, and they follow their habit, and they feel over a period of years are at the bottom of a deep rut, and they look at how high it is to climb out, and they go, I'll just get comfortable down here, So they don't make big changes in their life, and they're even threatened by big changes. My dad was a type 9, and when I'd say, let's do this, he'd go, well, I don't know, maybe that's a lot of work. And he wouldn't entertain things like that. He liked his routines. Type 9, as it appears in the feminine, I have a type 9 female right now. She comes in and she sits and she smiles at me, and her marriage is in turmoil, but she smiles. And I say, look at that peaceful smile. Everything is just A-okay, isn't it? And then the smile disappears and she begins to weep. I go, okay, now you don't have to play a role for me of that you're all happy. Okay, no more roles. I don't know who I am without a role. So they're kind of like the waiter. What do you want? You want fries with that? How do you want that cooked? Well, what do you want? Me? I'm just the waiter. I don't have an opinion. So they can be very maddening in that way. If you're in a relationship with a type 9, you are because you just want to shake them to find out what they feel. When a type 9 is having trouble in their marriage, with men, I often say, when you walk in the kitchen and ask your wife, what can I do? You just made yourself another thing for her to do. So don't do that. See what needs to happen, take a position and enfold yourself into it. So 9 moves towards 3 when they're integrating. So when 9 becomes actively engaged, they stop wondering what their position is and start taking action. This is what I want to do. So overall, when you study the types, you begin to see why 5 is attached to 8, why 8 is attached to 2, why 2 is attached to 4. An 8 can't become a 3. It doesn't happen that way. This is a process, and it goes in a direction of integration and disintegration. And only after years of study of your own 3 centers do you begin to feel yourself as an Enneagram, and you begin to feel a movement inside of you. So as a type 5, when I'm under stress, I become very paranoid and I become self-doubting, and I start getting more books out. I got to study some more about the certain mode of psychotherapy. However, when I integrate towards type 8, I start trusting my instincts down here because 8 is a body-based type. And I can say profoundly important interventions all in one moment, which shocks a person into a state of awakeness. And they go, wow, oh my God, that happened just like that. A few people have said, well, you're like Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil is a type 8. He's made a living out of
He's
doing.
an asshole.
He's an asshole. But he's at certain times when he's in a healthy mode, he can tell people instinctually what they need to hear in that moment. And so sometimes when I'm connected to that part, I can do that. However, when I'm really type 8, I can feel myself move towards type 2, which I become very compassionate and loving and giving like a type 2. And even then I can feel type 2 in me move towards type 4, which is where I start writing poetry. I'm a poet, and I start getting very effusive and feeling and authentic. So you begin to feel you are an Enneagram. To show you a larger application, this will blow your mind. Here's a larger application of the Enneagram. If we take, let's use the solar system, our solar system. There's 9 planets around our star. Pluto is questionable whether it's a planet, just like type 9 is questionable if it's a personality or not in that regard. So Pluto being the 9th one. But let's take the sun as the center of the solar system, and we're going to put the sun right here at type 9. There's the sun. Around the sun accretes in an accretion disk. If you fling out material like in a sprinkler, it forms balls of things, accretes planets. So an accretion disk is a curvature. Around the sun accretes these planets. And this third planet from the sun right there is different because an impulse from the sun along this line strikes this planet and creates something called life. The first life is plant life. So then we're going on further. Accreting around the surface of the planet is plant life. Here we go around this here. Plant life gives off a waste gas called oxygen. This oxygen is this line, creating mammalian life here. Mammalian life creates consciousness. Consciousness evolves on this line, creating experiences which give rise to what the universe is seeking, qualities of compassion, understanding, forgiveness, forbearance, love. Love can only be created through this process. Here's the process of creating these finer qualities called feelings. So the universe, or the solar system, is an Enneagram 2, including the 9 arms of the Milky Way, which are also, and even from the Big Bang, we can find the laws of 3 and 7 as they manifest. So we can think of the universe as a descending octave in the array of creation, and humans are very, very far down that descending octave. You don't even want to know how far down we are. It's a little frightening. So what we must do is to contact the higher impulse that created us. We have to contact it by uniting these 3 forms of intelligence in ourself. And when they are united and in alignment, a 4th intelligence appears within us, which does not go into words and I cannot describe to you. Great teachers have tried to describe it over the history of mankind and given it different names: enlightenment, the kingdom of heaven, etc. And religions have been created around it. But what it really is an experiential understanding of what you actually are. You're a potentiality for these 3 centers to come into alignment again as they were shortly after you were born. And then a new form of awareness appears. And that new form of awareness is unmistakable when you have it. In Zen, the practice of Zazen, we call it Satori. And when you have a Satori experience, your teacher tells you, don't talk, because it doesn't go into words. And as soon as you start to talk about it, you're starting to use this, and you're starting to conceive of it more, and it's gone. Poof, you've lost it. So that's a possibility for humans. The man who brought us the Enneagram, Mr. Gurdjieff, who died in 1949, taught his students through the art of dance. And when you look at what he was teaching them in dance, you see that he's teaching them to put their bodies in the different positions of the Enneagram. Although he didn't teach it through ego fixation, he would explain to his students, you each have a chief feature. And he would never tell them what their chief feature was or how it worked. It was only years later when we figured out what he was trying to keep secret and to maintain his sense of power, because he was a type 8 and he wouldn't share with them completely. Now we know what it is. We know how it works. It's made its way up in the field. The Enneagram in the future, in early Christianity, Christianity wasn't established really until 200 or 300 years after the death of Christ. So 200 or 300 years from now, the Enneagram will be a common study among humans, and we'll be using it in many different applications of life. It's just not widely known yet and widely accepted. But when you work with it and you feel it inside of yourself experientially, you can confirm it. You can confirm the laws that make it real through your own experience. And Gurdjieff would say that, don't believe anything I say. Belief doesn't enter into it. You have to experience a movement of energies within yourself. And that's the best way. So for character style and character development, it is absolutely unbelievable. You study an Enneagram type, and you know how the types interact actually with each other, what they're seeking, you can create powerful stories, powerful narratives by studying them. Yes.
I just wanted to see if anyone might have questions for you.
Yes. Here we go. Questions.
And they may or they may not, so don't be offended. It's a lot of information to take in. Martha?
I had a question about this, the false self, the essence of who we are not. Do we build that mostly, like, say, in our teenage years unconsciously, or is that something we can actually consciously compound and complicate? And
No, sadly, you cannot consciously pick which personality type. Your personality type is a reaction to your early environment. And a reaction to your gods, which are mom and dad when you're a baby. There's two periods of life where more accreation of your type happens, and that's in toddlerhood and again, when you start your teen years. You can see the ego style beginning to fixate in a toddler. When another toddler picks up his toy, he grabs it and says, mine, right? And now we're talking about ego. And then it happens again in the teen years. And after that, it's pretty much set in motion. A person's type is set in motion. As a type 5, I will never not be a type 5. I will always be a type 5, but I can become a better type 5, a more integrated type 5. Until eventually I begin to feel myself as a process again. And that's a profound experience, a profound understanding that humans are capable of, but they don't know about. You don't know that you're unfinished and that only you have the capacity to complete yourself through a study of your process, but no one spelled it out what that process is. And so the best we have are religions that point the way. So yeah, you can't choose what your children are going to be. Interestingly, in family systems theory, when I look at a family, I can find that the family is trying to make an Enneagram, that the kids will be all the different types. Virginia Satir was the first one to have an observation of this when she saw that kids play roles like the mascot, the golden child, the scapegoat. And from my perspective, what she was describing are the different points of a family to make up a whole Enneagram. So you don't get to pick, sorry, your type. You're gonna be the one you least like.
Sajna had a question here about whether or not type A, type B personality theory fits anywhere in the Enneagram.
Yeah, it's really been observed. I find the Enneagram to be the most authentic and true description of what we are. However, other theorists have come close. Carl Jung created his own typology, which later became the Myers-Briggs personality test. The reason I struggle with Myers-Briggs is because it actually puts you in a little box. You're an INFJ or INTJ or something like that. And in that box, there's no movement. The Enneagram shows you a movement that's possible. So it's possible for me as a thinking type to become a more intuitive type when 5 goes towards 8. So I'm not locked into just being a thinking type. So the Enneagram is more democratic, but all kinds of typologies. The Hippocratic typology, you're either sanguine or phlegmatic, or too much bile. That was Hippocrates' first observation of psychology, was if you had too much of one bodily fluid or humor, that made your personality. So let's look at type 4. It's the most sanguine of all types, right? So they kind of overlap like that, and we can use different words to describe them as pointers to type. And there are a lot, corporate America invests a lot in employees taking personality tests, and there's all kinds of different models. Some people are, what's that new one called? Internal family systems. Some people are managers. Some people are firefighters. Some people are. So again, it's all pointing towards what you are as a part in a larger whole. That's all it is.
Any other questions, anybody? All right. I'll get the titles again from Erik of the books that he uses that would be helpful for just character development. And then otherwise, thank you for giving us your time.
That was a lot. There was like 20 years of blah all at you.
Oh, I appreciate that you can condense it so quickly and so succinctly.
It's
Even
fast.
after living with you and hearing you talk about it for many years, I still learn something when you give your talk. So
Oh, wonderful.
yeah. All right, Henny. Well, go enjoy your Friday night now.
Bye. Bye.
Love you.
Love you.
You know
Bye.
how to log off? Oh, he's cute. It's fun to hear your partner talk and be like, oh, I wonder what other people think of you.
That was incredible. My mind is officially blown.
It's pretty interesting. I think so. And of course, because we've been together so long, I know the types. And so like, whenever we meet someone, we're like, okay, what type are they? We do all this like type talk. I mean, and I know it can sound reductive or like you're putting people in boxes, but that's why I like how he talks about it as a process, so that you like have your fixation, but then you have that integration and disintegration. And I think that's really useful for characters because, you know, we've got we're always talking about character transformation, right? So when you think about, you could look at your Enneagram type that you've decided your character is and find what they look like when they're less integrated and have them behaving from that place. And then as they get more integrated, what choices do they make? What kinds of, you know, self-image do they have? And so I find that really useful as a tool. And, you know, you'll see, you'll try it out for yourself or you can go through, you might even find, because a lot of us, I think, write characters that remind us of real people on some level, you might find you can already pinpoint the type of characters you've already written. So here's the exercise that I want to do. And then we'll wrap up. I want you to, so he talked about the 3 centers, right? The feeling center, the thinking center, and the intuiting center. So pick one of the characters that you're working on right now and figure out which of those 3 centers they come from: the feeling center, the thinking center, the intuiting center. And then I want us to write a scene in which they're really acting from that place. So are they really in their mind? Are they really like enacting their feelings? Are they acting on some kind of instinctual place? I know that's not like a lot of guidance, but I want to leave you room to just play with it. Since I don't think we have enough time to pinpoint the specific types of our characters, I think this is a good starting place. So I'll give you time to write.
Jordan, can you describe that again, what you want us to do?
Yeah, so pick the center that you feel your character comes from, thinking, feeling, or intuiting, and then write a scene in which they're really fixed in that position. So they're either coming at the world, observing something through their mind, they're in a really intense feeling state, or they're using their feelings to observe the world or react to something, or they are staying in their intuitive, like they're making a decision from a intuitive place, or they're behaving in a way that's relying upon their intuition. Does that make sense? Okay, give it a try. About 30 seconds left. Okay, there's your timer. Wrap up your thoughts, your sentence. Gosh, pickles. All right. Any one of you want to go first? Martha?
I always shyly raise my hand. Okay, I thought Elora was mostly feeling, but the scene that, well, it's not a scene, but what came out was totally thinking. So here you go. I hold my tail in my lap. I can do that now while sitting down. A cool development, if I do say so myself. I brush the thing. The brown hair is so shiny now. And I'm going to see my Demi soon. And I've made up my mind. I'm going to have the prettiest tail in town. Mom says I've crossed over to the other side. Mom says a lot of things. Mom says she herself is as human as they come. She says this whole lie while roaming our hills at dawn, dirt caked on her breasts. She says this lie while sitting pretty at her vanity.
I like it. I like it. It does seem like she's in her thought process there, but it doesn't mean she's not an emotional type, but interesting. I liked it. Who would like to go next? Tatani.
I think this is intuiting. I don't know. It's Chanel at the doctor's office.
Yes.
This doesn't feel right. His hands on me like he knows me, like there's ownership behind his movements. He eyeballs me like we're in a bar and it's closing time. And I'm the last resort he's going to use and discard and expect me to be grateful for it. But here we are in a clinic office and he's got me down and spread and ready for examination, judgment. Keeps asking me about my kids, how I'm still so tight and free of stretch marks for a woman who gave birth so young to so many kids. 4 isn't so many, but he thinks it is. I don't like the way he handles these instruments. He's more careful with metal them than with flesh me. And I bet he was one of those kids who takes frogs apart after he pops it with a slingshot. My guts feel bubbly. He makes me want to run, but this is who I see to take this away. These cramps, these clots, this bleeding that won't stop. He sees me sizing him up and quick as a snake changes his face to kindly. He's a trickster, this one. What if he makes me disappear?
Wow. I would agree that that's very intuitive. She's got a really strong gut sense. I just have to say, how do you pull that out in 6 minutes? All of you are so great. I just love that.
You give me good prompts.
Well, I don't know. I don't think this was a great prompt. You just went there. All right. Who would like to go next? Rita?
Mute. Okay. I'll let you guess what you think it is. Alex invited me to spend New Year's Eve with him in San Antonio. I couldn't make it on such short notice. Not like I'm popular or anything, but I did promise to meet some friends. Not that they would mind if I went to San Antonio for a New Year's date, but I didn't have the money anyway. I probably could have found a million reasons not to go, really. Me and my friends watched the ball drop in Times Square. People waved flags among all the extra police. No one felt like celebrating, really. I called Alex and woke him up. I'm coming to see you, I said, and he laughed. That's all I got.
I mean, so you want us to guess which
You can guess.
What do you guys think?
I think it's feeling.
Yeah.
Definitely feeling. I'll tell you what type too. Yeah, type 9.
Peacemaker? I love it. Oh, you guys are gonna be good
I
at this.
humbly submit.
Was that right, Rita? Was it feeling? Or was it thinking? Or was it the opposite? You're muted again, so I don't know. Mr. Pickles. Here, look, if you're gonna come,
I'm always muted.
then you need to just, oh, he's gonna attack me now. Just like, if you're gonna do a drive-by, you gotta say hi. That's what I was going for. Anyways.
I tried to make it more like she just was spontaneous about calling him and going.
That's kind of
It
intuitive.
definitely was. This is happening around right after like the Christmas, New Year's of 9/11, after 9/11.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So it's kind
Cool.
of like revisiting that time, and everybody was just not as much of a celebration.
Right. Right. Oh, interesting. That's really interesting. I like that. Cool. Well, thank you for that. All right. Sajna?
I don't know if I
No right or
achieved
wrong.
much of that from. I kind of like the type, which was it? One of the dysfunctional types. I think it is type 8 and type 9 and type 5. So anyway, I just managed 4 lines.
Mhm.
When I was born, my mom had to choose my star abilities. Would I be her or dad in terms of her magical abilities? If I was her, I would look out for myself, but unlike her, bring terror to the world. If I was dad, I would enjoy great success and material pleasures without a modicum of morals. I would control humans if I was her. I would control gods if I was him. Mom chose well. That's all I managed. It's more like a combination of 2 dysfunctional personalities.
Oh yeah, I like it. I like it very much. One of the things that I like a lot about the system is the idea of motivation, what motivates characters. And then because I was listening, as he was talking, I realized he was kind of talking more from the place of disintegration, like when he was talking about the types. And so one of the things I think I typed in the chat was like, remember that on the integrated side, all the types are magnificent in their own way. Like they all have positive qualities, but average to disintegrated, we tend to see more of the negative, right? But that doesn't mean that all types are negative. That's, so anyways, just want to say that. Yana, would you like to share yours?
Sure. I never said you could open your mouth, she whispered closely in my ear. I stiffened slightly, fixing my impossible posture. I feel the whisper of her breath on my neck. Forgive me, Mother, I say, raising my head an inch. I forgot myself. You seem to forget yourself every day. Mother moves towards the table, picking a slightly drooping flower from a fresh bouquet. Slowly looking to me, picking off petals, one by one. I can't stand it when you forget me, she huffs. More petals flutter to the wood surface. Don't you ever think of me? I take in a deep breath. I always think of you. I take a few steps toward her, raising my hand. I do everything for you. Do you? She asks. Your little silver tongue tells me you don't think of anyone but yourself. She drops the dismembered flower on the table. The second you are allowed to breathe on your own, you dishonor us. She brushes past me, my coat pushed away from me. The room was colder now. Perhaps I would do better dead, I mutter to myself. Perhaps then I would be as pristine as you would like.
Ooh, there's some tension between those two. I love it. There's a lot of emotion in that. There was a lot of feeling, whether or not that was your intention. It was like, oh, I was feeling things in that.
There's a lot of feeling, but I think that's really tampered down because of all the thinking she has to do to stay a couple of steps ahead of everyone.
Ooh, I like that.
A little bit of the peacemaker, a little bit of the
kind of calculating.
Perfect. Calculating, yeah. More of the thinky area.
That's interesting because 9 can have a 1 wing, 1 can have a 9 wing, perfectionist and the peacemaker. So that's an interesting.
That's what I was going for, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think you achieved it. Excellent. Very nice work, everybody. So yeah, I want us to think about sort of, through this lens of integration and disintegration. I want us to think about our character development along those lines for the future in terms of your characters aren't bad or good. They're either emotionally healthy or less emotionally healthy. They're more reactive or less reactive. And then of course, if you decide to go a little deeper into the personality types, you can get specifics, but even just that concept of integration and disintegration, I think is very useful, because if you've got a very integrated character who then goes through a stressful situation or a challenge, they're going to disintegrate. What will that look like? How will they behave? And then you can understand and help the reader understand their motivations, because well, this is how they act under stress. This is how they act under grief, et cetera. And I think that's very useful in building a strong character. So let's set our goals for next week. And just so you know, I'm starting to reach out to other writers to bring in a few more guest speakers who can talk about, like, we talked about like writing sex scenes. So if there's that's the only thing, but that's just off the top of my head. If there's any other topic that's been kind of burning that I haven't really gotten to, and you want to email me or tell me today, I will look for some other speakers to kind of bring in and teach about those. I thought it'd be cool to get someone who's like really maybe a master of dialogue. Like we've talked about dialogue, but I think that you can go really deep into how to write strong dialogue, things like that. Is there any topic that you're really kind of interested in seeing a guest expert come in on?
What about humor?
Humor. Oh, we need humor. I gotta find that. Okay.
Humor always sells in a book.
Yeah, how to work in some humor, especially if you're not naturally funny.
Especially if you're as flat as a wet towel.
I'm only funny by accident, so I get that one. Anyone else have a topic that's been? All right, well, think about it. And if something comes up, email me, but I'm going to get a few people. I don't know how many, I'm not going to make like all our classes a guest speaker, but just bring in a few, I think brings color and interest. Exposition devices. That's a good one. All right, great. All right, let's set our goals.
Wait, could I amend my request? Because
Yeah.
I remember the last session we brought up describing how to politically correctly describe people of color, and I don't think we ever got back to that. I would rather have that one.
Well, we can have more than one.
Yeah, that'd be a good one.
Yeah, I think it might be interesting to have a topic like how to carefully and tenderly, I'm trying to think of the right word, legitimately write from a person who is not yourself, and that could include how to describe people,
or minorities, not just
yeah, no, I know what you're saying. Like for instance, I'm trying to bring in a speaker to my nonfiction classes who can talk about like how can we remember to write about our various privileges, so that when we are writing about something, we don't leave out the fact that like something might be harder for someone else, and how can we incorporate that information in a way that doesn't just feel like I tacked this on, like if you're a white man, how can you acknowledge your privilege without being like, I know I'm a white man, So morally great character. Wait, I've got a few in the chat. You guys are awesome. So yeah, sensitivity training. Yeah, I guess that is, but specific to writing. And then Yana, you say morally great characters, which I love. Any sort of help on how to write them in a way that's believable, or what's your?
Understandable, like it just comes across, like it doesn't have to be explained, and it's more of a journey than it is a personality thing.
Okay.
Because usually that is driven.
Yeah. Okay. And some of these I may try to work on lessons myself, and then the places where I don't really have that experience, like humor and sensitivity, I would like to bring that in someone else. Okay, good. All right, now we'll set our goals. Rita.
Let's see. I'm going to turn this work in and start on a more substantial piece.
Okay, start a substantial piece.
Or edit what I have as a substantial piece.
Or edit it.
Yes.
Got it. Natani?
Back to this piece again. Just work on it some more. Try to get
Which
my
one?
submission done.
The one, for your submission? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yana?
Figure out my characters more, I guess, and just who they are.
Okay. Sajna?
I'm going to continue writing from where I left off. Maybe get a few pages in. Yeah.
Okay. And Martha.
My scene inventory, hopefully finish.
Scene inventory finish. Great. Well, thank you guys for hanging in there with me today. I definitely was had to lie down a few times during this talk. You see me on the couch. I'm like, but I'm starting to feel a little better. So thanks for your patience and flexibility. And I'll send the recording out later on. So have a good weekend.
Thank you for having it. That was a great talk.
It was
Yeah.
really great. Thank
Thanks for
you.
making
Again.
Fun.
Bye, everybody. Have a good
Okay.
week.
Bye.
Bye.